Welcome to the Can't Drive series. This is where these two ultra cool guys are going to hang out, we're going to talk story, and we are literally going to invite ourselves, but with positive vibes only, into your own journeys.
We're excited to share our perspectives, experiences, and the experiences of so many individuals we find inspiring in ways that we trust will bring you hope, motivation, and the inspiration to grow and ultimately thrive because, as I say, can. Jason is my coach, a cool Jamaican now living on the island of Kauai. He has launched a coaching platform that blends a scientific approach, drawing from his PhD and background as a former biomedical researcher and medical communications consultant. Jason's now a highly regarded fitness specialist and coach. He focuses on tapping into his clients' sense of strength as they physically and mentally transform and thrive.
Yeah, it's true. I am Andy's coach. This guy isn't an entrepreneur. He's the founder of a local Kauai apparel brand known as Can Period, which is really rooted in the principles of positive psychology. He's also a dedicated nonprofit fundraiser with a background as an elite endurance athlete and somebody who cherishes all the endorphins that are downstream of really challenging physical activities, usually very, very cardio focused. But he's super committed to continually improving in all aspects of his life, and more importantly, in helping others to discover their own spirit of can. All right, guys. So on this episode of the Can't Drive series, we're taking a look at what's called the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And you've probably heard these terms thrown around before. The way I try to look at each of these is, for a fixed mindset, you're sort of using, internal chatter, if you will, if you'll notice it, that, is around I can't or I am not. So something in a negative connotation, or I am in a negative connotation, without leaving room for the idea that you can grow or learn. So, something like I can't draw, or I'm not a good writer. That's a sort of fixed mindset around writing or drawing. So it doesn't create any room, if you will, for making progress or for applying effort in order to make progress. Andy, what do you think about, how you define fixed mindset versus a growth mindset? And I've only just touched on the fixed, and we can hop into the growth first if you like, or you can just take it in terms of how you see a fixed mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a daily battle, really, and and obviously I've got a coach like you, so we've worked through those concepts a lot, and I think one aspect that I've learned from you is a want,
Right.
Concept of want.
Mm-hmm.
So irregardless of what the task is or the thing that you're trying to accomplish or the new podcast you're trying to launch with your coach, you literally
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally have to bring a youthful thought process to it, in which you really just not too worried about what's going to happen. And it's really hard to do, right? You wake up each day filled with the can't, as I would say, and a lot of that becomes a fixed mindset. And I fight through it all the time, where I'm just thinking about, trying to push the can't out and all the reasons why it's not possible I'll be able to do something or accomplish a task. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that for me is momentum. If I just get moving, you talked about the endurance athlete stuff I love about my background, and a lot of that, I need some endorphins or something just to get me moving in the right direction. So I would say it's super common for everyone to be dealing with it. It's just whether or not they understand the concept of it as fixed or growth, which I do think it can be that simple once you start trending in one way or the other. So it's a matter of finding the tools, and you might share some of that. How do you find your way out of that? That fixed mindset, and maybe share some of the stuff we worked on as far as me.
Yeah. So, I mean, all really good points. The one thing that you said that I want to just re-emphasize is, starting a day or trying to inhabit sort of the beginner mindset, the I'm a toddler mindset. Because if you look at a toddler, someone who's new to something, like they enter a world where they don't know how to master what is around them or the task at hand. But it's almost like they don't even see that. They just see the possibility of what they could potentially do. And so it's all about forgetting the current state of ability or historical ability and like really focusing on what could be the potential or the future. And that's the switching over into the growth mindset. For you, it's the can't and the can. But I think before people can even step into understanding that growth mindset, it's like, well, how does a fixed mindset even show up? Because we're all a mix of, a fixed mindset pattern about some things and a growth mindset pattern about other things. And usually it's like, well, I'm good at this thing. So you flip into that growth mindset. You're good and you want to get better. And we tend to be a little bit more stuck in the things that we're not necessarily good at or haven't done much of previously. Then we're like, oh, I want to shy away from tackling that thing. There's a little bit of a fear of failure. It's like, I'm going to avoid that challenge. You know what I mean? And once you're able to see those situations and see when you switch into that sort of a fixed, fearful mindset of labeling yourself or your ability without looking at, well, what can I learn? How can I do this better? What creative ways can I approach the situation or challenge or problem that I find myself in? Once you can see those things happening in real time and sort of have an awareness around the context or the specific things, now you have an opportunity. The key is the awareness. The key is the mindfulness and the spotting it. And once you spot it, now you have an opportunity to start to reframe. Not necessarily overnight, but you can start to challenge yourself. Well, yes, all right, you have a block against. There's something that you're, sort of resisting or assuming to be the case. But if you shifted your focus just a little bit, you start to move towards that growth mindset.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's like identifying it. So, there's habits and things that I think help me. One is I go back and forth on this because I can get lazy, which I think lazy is a bit of a fixed mindset, but literally putting my phone on my nightstand or putting my phone like further away to where one, I don't start looking at it first thing in the morning, which I think lends to a fixed mindset because I'm filling myself with the to-dos or I'm thinking of all the to-dos in my life or the challenges because for some reason my phone just presents those really well. And I was also thinking about the concept that being childlike. It's funny, but I do think like a Grom is a young surfer, and I love
it sounds like a worm to me, but okay, that's a Grom.
I know.
Okay, a Grom, got it.
A Grom is just like a young surfer,
yeah.
And I've always thought of this concept of like re-Grom, like to Grom again, which is just be joyful and have fun, and that's why I do think that for me, if I can get into a cycle of a growth mindset, and sometimes it is starting out with something you're good at, and maybe that's a good habit to form is the first thing. Get into the mindset of your capacity to accomplish and do certain tasks, and then you're not right away bombarded by all of the things you're worried about or not able to that put you in a super fixed state of being.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The sort of idea of a fixed mindset, again, going back to Groms in surfing or literally an infant or a toddler. For all of us, this fixed mindset, that's not where we started. You know what I mean? It's sort of something that we learn through, I'm not going to bash the education system in any way, shape, or form. I mean, schooling and the schooling education system is important to help us to learn and grow, but there are aspects that maybe instill a little bit of fear. There's a need for some standardized testing, and you start to, over the years, sort of accumulate ideas about who you are and what your abilities are, which aren't real. You know what I mean? You can literally be good at anything you choose to be good at in a way that's meaningful for you. But the reality is that's not most people's life experience. And so we come to a point in life where we're just all a mix of, we're sort of fixed over here when it comes to this task or ability, but we're way more growth oriented over here. And it's one of those things that can show up a lot in the lives of people who are, I'm going to say, high achievers or people that are very driven to accomplish a lot of things. Because to do that requires things like risk taking. To do that requires, you sort of putting yourself out there in front of others and being okay with the idea of someone criticizing or judging, the idea that if you have a setback, that can be sort of damaging to your self-worth. that sort of thing. But on the flip side, changing that mindset to be like, yeah, I'm probably going to fail, right? I'm going to fail in multiple ways. I'm probably going to fail often. But the difference is taking away from that quote unquote failure, just something that you realized, an insight, a nugget, something you learned, so you can treat it like, well, okay, didn't do the thing didn't turn out the way I wanted, but I learned something. The next time I can, come back stronger, if you will.
I like that a lot. I was actually, you got me thinking about education a lot with one of our phenomenal CAN ambassador, Jenna Caitlin, who is at Wahiawa Middle School on Oahu. And she literally found us because she started this thing called the I Can't jar. And it's literally like a tax system. I think it's hilarious. So if a kid says that they can't do something, they have to write sort of like equalize it. It's like her algebra formula for CAN, and it has to balance out. So you have to write something that is possible if you say you can't do something and put it in the jar. And I thought that was like a really neat sort of trick and concept to just ensure that you don't kind of tailspin into a cycle of a bunch of those. So I agree, though it's hard. The education system is a lot about challenging yourself, and if you don't think of it in that manner, then you won't be able to or young students won't find their way without teachers and mentors like that. So I just think that's a super neat concept. I was also thinking about recently, as you get older, because we're talking about youthfulness and
we don't know anything about that, though. I mean,
we don't know anything about that. But like fixed is sort of standard issue, right? That's like the sweet spot, because you get older and you start to you retract and start to try to control things and get nervous about things. And I think that's a huge battle as you get older, to really find new things to engage with, and try to put aside fear and worry in a few instances each day. Not big risks, but something. Because I'll say societally, or throughout society, I'll say you see it, I think, in terms of prejudice and racism and different things, because you're not taking the time to have a growth mindset about people and concepts. You're just like, you know what? I'm fixed on it's this way.
It's always been this way, and therefore it shall always be.
And we have to keep remembering that that things are changing all around us. There's better and new music. There's all kinds of things that you could consider from a growth standpoint. And as I keep getting older, I'm having to test myself and consider, how do I look at things? And how could I not be lazy about it, not just fall into that fixed mindset. So there's a lot of fun ways to look at it, but it's an important concept, I think, for people to know.
Yeah, I mean, the story you shared, and I've already forgotten her name. I think you mentioned Jenna. Yeah. It's an interesting experiment, not only in my mind, from my perspective. It sounds like what's likely to happen is the kids will now have a greater awareness of when they hear themselves in their minds saying, I can't, and or, recognizing that they have potential just in the moment.
So awesome. I love that concept.
Balancing it with, well, what am I good at? What can I do? What is a positive possibility? And I think that's missing not only in the educational system, it's probably missing across the board, right?
It really is. I that's what I loved about it so much, is it was like, wait a minute. Maybe in the moment that's not possible, but that's not going to be your mindset going forward. Because I do think kids do end up in that protective state and fixed state, and then they don't realize there's a bunch of things they're really great at, and they contribute in the classroom and with their peers. And so I do think that's and then they're bombarded, obviously, from social media and other things that show them what others are doing.
I'll take it even further back than that. I mean, just, from personal experience, the educational system, for example, in Jamaica, when I grew up in Jamaica, which was very recently, don't worry, everything was geared toward academic achievement, which in its own right
is a valid and, it's a good target, right? But when you think about, well, what are the implications of a single-minded focus on academic achievement? Number one, it's like I need to attain a certain number, right? A certain number in these specific courses or subjects.
Yeah.
So that excludes those who aren't interested or necessarily gravitate naturally towards some of those things, to start to internalize that fixed mindset around their own intelligence, which truly is not a fixed quantity, right? And then expand that over the course of many years, and people can end up in life situations, like long-term situations, where they're not feeling fulfilled, they're not feeling appropriately challenged, they're not feeling like more is possible for them based on sort of the box they have been placed in, and then willfully put themselves in beyond that point, to really expand and explore, well, what am I interested in for the sake of being interested in it and not necessarily for anything else. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when our singular focus is on a measure of anything rather than embrace an experience for what it can teach you and what you can get out of it, sort of as a person, engage and grow, and use that experience to sort of fuel your interest further in that area, or to create the courage to explore other areas that may be considered you didn't know much about or didn't think you were good at. And then that sort of feeds itself forward in ways now where you're able to excel in, multiple different areas and sort of grow as a whole person rather than just growing, one aspect of who you are.
Yeah, I like the want concept that you talk about so much too. I think it's a great place to start, because if you don't even want to do something, then you're going to be fixed on that it's not successful and you're not good at it, and why should you even care?
Yeah.
But I think as soon as you take a step towards that want, even if it's in proximity to the thing that needs to get done, or the challenge or the new hobby, whatever it is, you can quickly, and I have to do that daily. I realize that
I think we all do.
My brain just operates that way, and I think most people do. There's some outliers that just wake up stoked and ready for anything, but
I think that's only partially true. I think it's true in terms of what we see. I think it's not true because we can never be in someone else's mind or see the full picture of their experience, But you're exactly right. And when I think about, early on, you asked, well, how do you sort of step into that zone of a growth mindset? I mean, the first thing is you said, well, we experience a fixed mindset in different areas every single day, probably multiple times a day. So the first step is that awareness. Yeah. When am I likely to adopt a fixed mindset? When am I likely to be fearful, defensive, shy, if you will? When am I trying to avoid something? And then understand that circumstance and see it as an opportunity to sort of flip the script 180. Let's try to reframe it. And then think.
It's all identifying, it sounds like.
It's identifying
and then like the key,
taking on the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, that's step 2.
Yeah. Take on the challenge, see what you can do with it creatively, right?
Yeah.
There's not one way to skin a cat.
No, and I think that's the one thing. I'll say, not just giving you lots of credits here, but
I'll take them.
The help is just the concept of just identifying that as quickly as possible. Because even if you slow your brain down and understand, okay, I'm in this formula now of fixed versus growth, and I'm being more fixed.
And just looking at, well, why am I looking at this issue this way?
Yeah.
Is there a different way that's probably more accurate to look at it? Am I looking at it only through the lens of my sort of historical experience? Well, I've always been a subpar artist, and that's why this flower looks like a blob, right? Yeah. That flower looks like a blob because I'm remembering the blob-like flower that I saw 10 years ago. So there's always a different story that's out there that you can sort of more creatively tap into, and then sort of redefine, for so many of us, success looks like numbers someplace.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And, just taking a step back, I'm like, is it really about the number? Is it really about what I'm putting into it in terms of process or effort. You know what I mean? And anytime you reframe from that perspective, you're already inhabiting that sort of growth I can mindset, because now you're applying effort. That's the one thing you can control, right?
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah. It's all about, well, I can't do something, but really I can't do it yet. If I want to do it.
It's more of a matter of timing. So much of it is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to dig into that regrom concept more, because I do think you just got to find a childlike joy sometimes.
You do. The world doesn't provide the opportunity for you to do that. You got to make it. Yeah.
Yeah. True. Yeah. You got so many, feel like targets on your back, or and it's all manifested in your brain. It's not, none of that stuff's true. People aren't really worried about what you're doing or what you're up to or any of that stuff, but you worry and fixate. But
I guess the last thing I would say, even as we're talking about fixed versus growth mindsets, the one thing that comes to mind is just taking a step back from sort of the negative connotations of any experience, and just start to look at, well, what could be, right? So instead of you're looking for, well, I'm trying to fix this here problem. Okay, that's valid. But instead of looking at this thing as this problem that I must solve, look at, okay, this thing exists, but what is possible? What instead could be real? And let that be sort of your anchor, because then there's going to be gravity between where you are and that, higher, better possibility that you can see for yourself. And you'll start to naturally, even subconsciously, gravitate in that direction by taking small steps. So that's my final thought. A fixed mindset, we're all there for many different areas of our lives and circumstances and contexts. We have an opportunity to adopt our growth mindset, maybe not overnight. Start with awareness and then build slowly towards that positive outcome. So that would be sort of my own personal takeaway for anybody who sort of struggles with being more in that fixed mindset than not. And then just know it's a shared human experience. You are not alone. In this way, you are not unique. Literally every single person has domains in which they're predominantly in a fixed mindset, and it's okay.
And you can break the cycle. I think is the key. But it just takes work. And you have to be aware of yourself going down that road. Sometimes daily, and sometimes you can get in a weekly rut, or stressed about work or whatever it might be. And you got to stay hopeful, but kind of use those tools and tricks and make sure you're doing things you want to be doing, and having fun with them, to ensure that there's a balance of a growth mindset is how I try and look at it in my own life. So,
and you will fail. You will probably fail a lot. That's okay. You'll have something to learn in every quote unquote failure, because on the backside of multiple failures is going to be the success you kind of didn't even see coming.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right,
guys. Hopefully that was a fun walk down the path of a fixed versus a growth mindset. If there are any specific topics you'd like to see us cover in the Can Thrive series, then definitely reach out to Andy or myself with those ideas. Would love to tackle those and sort of help you grow as we're on the path to growth for ourselves.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, guys, if our conversation has been meaningful to you in any way today, then please would like to encourage you to support us through, number one, subscribing to the Defeating Can podcast, which Andy regularly hosts. Of course, following the Spirit of Can on Instagram, and definitely go ahead and pick up a piece of Can merch from any of the retail outlets like Deja Vu Surf here on Kauai, or head online to thespiritofcan.com. We'll keep those links here below.
And be sure to follow Jason on LinkedIn and Instagram accounts, and reach out to him by DM with any fitness, lifestyle, or well-being and performance-related questions you have. He'd love to learn more about you, as he has with me, and support your continued growth and well-being through coaching.
All right, guys, super important to keep in mind the context of all our conversations here in this series. And I am a certified health and well-being coach. I'm a personal trainer. I'm a fitness nutrition specialist. But at the end of the day, I am not a physician. I am not a therapist. I'm not a registered dietitian. So it's really important to keep that in mind and consult with your preferred healthcare provider, whether that be a medical doctor or a therapist, to ensure that your particular needs are being met specifically by a trained professional.
And just as Jason mentioned, the discussions and concepts discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. If the can't in your mind ever becomes too much, we encourage you to consult with a professional. As I've always said, can't ask for help. You remember this sticker? You've probably seen it in order or out in the world. We've given away thousands of these, as it's so important that we want you to reach out when you need it.